Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, John. How are you?
Well, I'm well on this Saturday morning. I think that you and I have a unique perspective, different than most, and we're very fortunate because each of us has lived in a communist country or spent a lot of time in a communist country, and we can see what life is like when you have complete one-party rule and the only media that's there function as PR arms of that one rule party. Nothing good comes of that situation historically, and we know it usually only leads to violence.
I so agree.
And not the good kind of violence, which I would say is about liberty and freedom. I mean, the American Revolution was violent, but its purpose was to create liberty, to create freedom. I think this revolution that I fear I see happening is more like the French Revolution. It's not about freedom. It's about envy and power and acquiring other people's property. And that's why this election is so important. And I know there's a question in there for you, Jeff, somewhere, but I'm going to let you find the question.
Well, to lay all the cards on the table, what you saw at that presidential debate was a country that's now beginning to balkanize to the point that both sides can't stand the sight of each other. Both sides can't even let each other finish a sentence. That the media is now so in the tank for one of the two sides, i.e. the Democratic Party. This is a scandal of the highest proportions. What Chris Wallace did, as I call him the Weasel, Chris the Weasel Wallace, he denied America a debate. He stole that moment, that night from us by constantly interrupting the president, constantly blocking the president, constantly stifling the president. His questions were to put Trump on the defensive. That's what their intention was. They weren't even questions. They were essentially Democratic talking points, commentary, masquerading as a question. And then when Trump would ever try to get back on the offensive, Wallace was there to cut him off, to make sure he couldn't gain any momentum, to make sure that he couldn't deliver any kind of a knockout blow against Joe Biden. And my big fear, John, this is where I think things are getting very dangerous, is the media is now propaganda. It's not media. To use the term media it's a false term. To give them a certain level of respectability and, frankly, integrity that they don't have and they don't deserve. It's propaganda. It's what we saw under the Soviets. It's what we saw under the Nazis. In other words, complete service to the regime, complete service to one party, complete service to one agenda. Now, what to me is even more scary, you saw both Biden and Trump. This is balkanization. This is what happens when two sides so can't stand each other that they can't look at each other. There's no even any pretense of civility anymore. Everyone goes on about the president having interrupted Biden repeatedly, and it's true, he should have let Biden talk more. I do agree on that. Not just because it's the right thing to do, but in all honesty, because the more he let Biden talk, I think the more rope he would have given Trump to hang him with. He would have how can Biden make gaffes if you don't let him talk? But to me, the bigger issue is this. Biden kept insulting the President of the United States in ways that are just unimaginable.
Unimaginable. I mean, could you imagine of someone say to Obama, you're a jerk, or shut up? My goodness.
Or you're a coward, or you're a fool, or you're a clown, or you're a racist, or implying you're a mass murderer. I mean, basically laying it out there like, you're responsible for 200,000. What? I'm responsible for 200,000 dead? Are you kidding me? So when he said to Trump, shut up, man, that's where I think the president needed to really go Thunderdome on him.
Right.
He should have cut off Chris Wallace. He should have said, excuse me, I'm not going on with this until this is addressed. And I would have looked at him and I would have said, I'm the president of the United States of America, whether you agree or disagree. And if you're going to treat me this way, this disrespectfully, like an 8-year-old school child, then I'm telling you, you are not fit to be president of the United States, because you're not just insulting me. You're insulting the office of the presidency. You're insulting all the people that voted for me. And frankly, you're insulting the American people. I would never have let him get away with this. Instead, Biden is being lionized.
Right, yeah.
The left is saying, yeah, finally, somebody pulled him off. John, I'm going to be very candid with you, okay? This is the conversation I had with my wife after the debate. This is why I only slept 1 hour, because I was that revved up, because I can see what's coming. When I was in Croatia visiting my family, as you know, I was born and raised in Canada, but my parents came from the old country. Yugoslavia was in the process of dissolving. It was in the process of breaking up. Slovenia, which is where Melania Trump is from, and Croatia, where my parents are from, both Western Catholic republics that were within Yugoslavia, were about to break away. They were going to secede, and their model was America. Belgrade, the capital of Yugoslavia, and also the capital of the biggest republic, Serbia, didn't want them to break away. What I saw when I was there, this was in 1991, was the culmination of several years of non-stop Serbian communist propaganda, in which, led by this strongman called Milosevic, who controlled the media in Belgrade, all he did was portray Croatians as a bunch of Nazis. It never ended. It never stopped. It was, they're racist, they're Nazis, they're fascists, they're scum, they're subhuman. Every insult you can think of, all they did, it was 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when I was there, this was in June of 1991, I told them, I said, this place is going to blow. You think they're going to let you guys secede peacefully? You think they want to resolve this peacefully? You think they want to come to some kind of an agreement or an understanding peacefully? They are going to send in the tanks, and they are going to butcher you guys. Because in the end, Croatianism equals Nazism. And that is exactly what happened. Now, fast forward 29 years, almost 30 years, I am seeing the exact same process play itself out right here. Mm-hmm. We are deplorables. We are irredeemable. We're evil. We're racist. We're KKK. We're white supremacists. We're Nazis. We're fascists. They're preparing the population to so dehumanize Trump supporters, to so dehumanize conservatives, that it's gotten to the point, and by the way, that's how it was for about a year before the whole thing blew up in the former Yugoslavia. The politicians couldn't talk to each other. They were screaming at each other, insulting each other, couldn't stand the sight of each other. Everybody was in one camp or the other camp. It reminds me so much of what I saw in the Balkans. I said to Grace, I go, if they're not stopped now, this country's in big trouble, because you are now seeing the Balkanization of the United States, slowly but surely. And that's why I think in the second debate, the president really needs to understand, when he goes into that debate room or that debate hall, he is up against two. He's up against the moderator, and he's up against this guy, Biden. And he needs to put them in their place, because, John, if he doesn't, no matter what happens on November 3rd, my big fear now is both sides will not grant the legitimacy of the other.
Then we're in that situation that you just described. We are in the Balkan situation, because whenever, as you said, and I think this is what you meant, and correct me if I'm wrong, whenever you demonize someone to that extent, when you call them Hitler, when you call them Nazi, when you dehumanize them, you not only give the permission to commit violence on them, you create the obligation to commit violence. And that's the scary thing that I see.
You're right. And it's not just the permission to commit violence and even the obligation to commit violence, but I think there's also a political or electoral ulterior motive. It's now almost the obligation to commit voter fraud. I would do this thought experiment with my students all the time when I was teaching at McGill. I would say, if you could go back in time, say circa, 1931, a year before Hitler ascends to power, would you assassinate him?
Right.
And everybody put up their hands. Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. I said, okay, let me ask you this. If you went back to 1931, before the big election that made Hitler eventually Chancellor of Germany, would you commit ballot fraud? Would you stuff the ballot? Would you cheat in order to prevent him from winning? All of them. Oh, yeah, definitely. Well, that's what the Democrats and the media are laying the groundwork for right now.
Of course they are.
If he's such a unique threat to our democracy, if this is the second rising of Hitler, vote often, vote again and again, do what you got to do, get illegals to vote, get non-citizens to vote, get dead people to vote, vote 4 times, 5 times, 7 times. This is the catastrophe, the train wreck that I think is clearly befalling this country. In other words, what they're saying is, heads we win, tails you lose. That's how desperate they are to get rid of him.
And they are, because he does pose the existential threat to them if he stays there long enough and persuades enough of us. And that's why this is a fight to the death, because there is no middle ground between the two of them. This dynamic is there. This paradigm is there, the fight to the death. And we are all going to get caught in the crossfire. That's what's going to happen. What stuns me, Jeff, is when I talk to millennials, family members even, how silent they have been on the violence out there. And I think for some of them, they really are deluded. They don't believe that the violence is there. But for the other half, and that's the more scary part, they see the violence, but they approve of it. They think it's morally permissible, if not obligatory.
Well, they believe it's justified. Because if you believe that this country is a fundamentally evil, wicked country, systemically racist, as they keep using that term, from its very foundation, if the country is not founded in 1776, but as the New York Times now claims, 1619, and it was founded upon slavery and genocide and Islamophobia and xenophobia and misogyny, and you can run down all the list of so-called isms. Well, loot, burn. I mean, these are your reparations. Tear this country down. It's an evil country. Rebuild it. Create a new socialist revolution. Tear down what was to create what's new. Now, John, I have to tell you, I think no matter what happens, we are going to have more violence. I think there's no question about that. We have emboldened the radical left. They now own the streets. Law enforcement has now been so morally beaten down and so discredited in the eyes of many within the public. And with so many politicians now throwing them under the bus, we are now going to see, sadly, you're going to see more Antifa, more Black Lives Matter, more rioting, more looting, whenever they don't get their way, because they're realizing no one can stop them, no one will stop them. The only person now that stands in their way is President Trump. And, you know, I have to say this, John, before we conclude this conversation. Within the debate and the tax story, those were the two, obviously, the big stories of the week, there was a stunning revelation, which is that Hillary Clinton, we now know through declassified documents, is actually the one who manufactured, who conjured the entire Russia collusion hoax in order to frame the president. And the FBI knew it was a lie. Comey knew it was a lie. Obama knew it was a lie. So did Joe Biden. So did many people within the previous administration. And yet they allowed this fraud to be perpetrated and Trump to be framed as an agent of Russia in order to cripple, subvert, and ultimately, they believe, destroy his presidency. Now, why is that important? Because Trump now understands it, and he even partially addressed it during the debate. More importantly, his supporters know now. They have absolute 1,000% confirmation that this is exactly what took place. In other words, the Democrats never agreed to a peaceful transition of power.
No, they didn't.
The bitterness that you feel among Trump supporters and among conservatives, and I've asked this to many. In fact, I'll even ask it to you now. In all honesty, I mean, you may disagree with me, which is fine, but do you feel like you've been in power the last 4 years?
No.
Do you feel that your guy's been in charge, that we actually won that election?
I have not. I have not. And it puzzles me why not. A third-year law student could persuade a grand jury to indict Mrs. Clinton on a whole arm's length of crimes. And why isn't that being done, for starters?
I've never met one Trump supporter who says, oh, yeah, you know, the way, let's say, liberals felt under Obama's first term, whatever you think of Obamacare and all this, the fact is they go, yeah, we're running this country. We got the White House. We got, for the first 2 years, the House and the Senate. Even when they lost the House, Obama was clearly in control of the country. And whenever he did anything where people opposed him, he said, well, elections have consequences. For 4 years, President Trump has been on the defense. He has been on the ropes. He has never had a chance to truly enact his agenda, whether it's the Russia collusion hoax, whether it's the Mueller investigation, whether it's impeachment, I could go on and on. So the Democrats never agreed to a peaceful transition of power. This is their delusion. This is what's very scary. They believe once they win in November, whether legally or illegally, whether it's a legitimate victory or a fraudulent victory, it doesn't matter. They believe they can restore the ancien regime. They believe that they can restore the swamp and the corrupt status quo, and that Trump supporters will take it on the chin. And what they don't understand is that there is tremendous bitterness among conservatives and among middle America and among Trump supporters, because we felt we weren't respected. We won that election, and they did everything to delegitimize it and to essentially subvert it. Now, they're not going to get their 4 years. They think they're going to get their 4 years, but they're not. I don't know how this opposition to, let's say, a Biden presidency will manifest itself, should he win. I don't know if it's going to take in the form of another form of resistance, if conservatives are going to protest. Who knows? We don't know what the future holds. But I just know that they will not put that genie back in the bottle. Biden will be considered illegitimate. When they try to make an argument for a peaceful transition of power, conservatives and Trump supporters will rightly say, you didn't agree to a peaceful transition of power for our guy when he won. Why should we agree for you? Live by the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. And so I think the election of Biden or Trump, it really doesn't matter. The country is going to continue to divide, to polarize, and to be even more split. Because, John, here is the fundamental conundrum. We are now two nations living in one. Liberal America and conservative America, except with a common language. All we have is that we speak English. Outside of that, we look at our founding differently. We look at American history differently. We have fundamentally different views, different values, different beliefs, different principles, social beliefs, cultural beliefs, economic beliefs, religious beliefs. It doesn't matter. It is now two countries or two nations that are forming. And once we take away the Constitution, and that's what they're starting to do now.
You know, Jeff, one quick question. When you got your American citizenship with Dr. Grace, and Kelly and Bill were with you, and you were in Faneuil Hall, did you ever think this day would come?
No. I mean, I'm shocked. I feel like I'm living in a nightmare.
Yeah.
And, John, I mean, if I can be even more personal, after what I witnessed 29 years ago in the Balkans, when I went to visit my family, I was there, June 25, 1991. Croatia and Slovenia declare independence. And that's when war broke out. And I saw neighbor versus neighbor. I saw people fighting on the streets. That's how I got my first foray into journalism. And I've never stopped really being a journalist ever since then. But I never thought that this virus, this disease of hatred, of tribalism, of racialism, of communism, that this would come to the United States of America. I never thought, in my wildest dreams, I never thought this would happen. Now look, I'm hoping, I got my fingers crossed. I believe there is a huge groundswell of support for President Trump. I think if it's a free and fair election, he will win, and he will win in a landslide on the Electoral College. No question about it. So I'm hoping that Trump delivers a decisive victory, and this can put this demon at bay. But if things turn out the way the polls are saying, where battleground states are going to be contested, where they're going to be counting ballots for a week, if not 2 weeks after the election, the next couple of months could be the most turbulent. And you know, John, it was Newt Gingrich who on my show said this election resembles to him 1860.
It does.
That this is a once-in-a-century election. And he said if Biden wins, it could be 1860 all over again. That he is such a radical, or to be more accurate, he is such a pawn of the radicals. He is such a puppet that they will so radicalize this country that it will start tearing it apart at its very foundations. So here's an elder statesman, an American historian himself. I think he's written, 15, 20 books. He's not a bomb thrower. He's got children. He's got grandchildren. The last thing he wants is to see this country break up or, God forbid, see any violence. But he is the one that is also warning us. And so that's why I'm urging everybody, you have to vote like your life depends upon it. It's now or never.
It does. And the sad and most painful difference between that first Civil War and this possible second one is in the first one we looked across the Mason-Dixon line. This time we look across the dinner table, and that's the worst part of it all.
Well, that's the worst Civil War possible.
Yeah.
Because it's not sectional. It's not geographic. It's literally within families. Family member against family member, brother against brother, sister against sister.
Yeah, the leftists planted that evil seed very well. Jeff, I know you need to go tend to your family this weekend, so go to it, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure. John, as always, keep up the outstanding work. You're a brave voice, my friend, and I want you to know I really admire you, and I really appreciate everything you're doing for you, for Kelly Financial, obviously, but especially for the United States. So God bless you, John, and have a great weekend.
And let's break bread soon.
You got it, my friend. Take care.
Bye-bye.